Hello, everybody. My name is Joe Marion. I want to welcome you to disposITion. I'm the president of ASCDI, and I have a confession to make. I didn't sleep very well last night. Not because I was nervous, but it's not a good thing not to sleep the night before you have 72 hours of meetings. But I was really excited. I was damn excited. I'm excited about where our industry is headed. I'm excited because before COVID, things didn't look so good for our industry. But then things changed. People were forced to work from home, as you know, supply chain issues, and our industry was designated as an essential industry to the infrastructure in almost every country in the world. I'm excited because our industry is now positioned as one of the industries that can impact sustainability. There's a direct tie in what we do in clean energy. We harvest renewable resources, and every time that we put a used product back into productive use, we're saving energy. I'm excited because of the opportunities. Investors are rewarding companies in our industries. So is the government. I read this morning that the US Department of Energy has $400 billion to hand out to companies that can assist in these areas of sustainability. And I'm excited because we've gone worldwide with disposITion. This is the first time in the history of the IT resale industry where there's a worldwide meeting going on. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a second. But we still have a lot of work to do. This week, I learned about a manufacturer or an end user, an enterprise that had a tape drive, two tape drives. They went dead on the same day. Two of the exact same tape drives went dead on the same day. We contacted the manufacturer and found out that the manufacturer wrote into the microcode that in May of 2023, this tape drive will die. And all he had to do was change the microcode to say, keep this thing up and running. But rather than do that, when we contacted the manufacturer, he said, tell the customer to throw it into a landfill and get a new one. Well, he didn't say throw it into a landfill, but that's what he meant. So we still have some work to do. One last thing. You can hear the word ITAD a lot today. Our industry has begun to use the word ITAD, IT reseller, service provider, a little bit interchangeably. We're all part of the same ecosystem. Some companies have decided to become certified ITADs. You hear a lot about that today. And some have decided to remain as IT resellers. We all have our part. We're all in the same industry, and we all have an important job to do. So I want to go real quickly and just kind of go through what we're going to be doing today. You can read the agenda yourself, but our next, we have a couple of esteemed speakers coming on next, Todd Bone and Rike Sandlin. We're going to talk about ITAD certifications after that. We're going to talk about ITAD tools. We're going to talk about the right to repair movement around the United States. We're going to talk about M&A, what's going on in merger and acquisitions, how's the valuations of your companies, what do you have to look forward to? And we're going to talk about sustainability from the standpoint of TCO, the certified company. At the end of the day, we're going to have our world famous speed networking session. You'll see a link on the left-hand side of your screen for networking. That allows you to spend 3 minutes networking with every attendee at disposITion. So stay tuned for that towards the end of the day. Now, tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern, which is 2 p.m. Central European time, we're going to do disposITion Europe. It's going to be a little bit the same as today, but it's going to have a European flavor. So if you feel like staying up or getting up, stay tuned for that one. Then the following day, it's Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern US time or 8 a.m. Sydney time. We're going to have the same meeting out in the APAC region. So feel free to attend one or all of them. Your ticket gets you into all three events. If you can stay up, I'm staying up. I'm drinking a lot of coffee. Hope to see you there. Lastly, I want to thank our sponsors. I'm not going to read all the names, but you can see them on your screen yourself. These guys are the ones that make it happen. It's a lot of work, takes a lot of money and a lot of time to set up disposITion. We could not do it without these sponsors. Guys, I want to thank you all very much for your support of ASCDI and our industry. Now let me bring on Todd Bone, who's actually on the stage, and Rike Sandlin. Guys, take it away.
Thanks, Joe. I'm going to share a couple slides with everybody. Bring that up. So there's a bunch of research organizations that are, following the ITAD industry, which is always a good thing for our companies because that means it's a hot market. And what you're going to find, and this is pretty standard, is this growth cycle between now and 2030 of the ITAD industry growing. So I've looked at probably about 5 or 6 different analysis firms, and they're all somewhere between the 6 and 12% increase range. So, just by looking at that, that you're in the right industry at the right time, especially if you can see the tremendous growth that's possible. So that's one good thing. And then if you look at the next slide, because this is a North American portion of our conference, I brought up, what's going on in North America by product line in terms of growth, and that's going to be hitting the aftermarket for us ITADs and companies that resell products. So I think that you can see that's pretty consistent too. This shows a 10% increase. So the supply should be excellent. The services, companies. I think that we've all found that the larger organizations are more have more programs that they've got to accomplish in terms of environmental controls, cybersecurity, data risk management, and getting on that. So I think that you're going to start seeing this trickle down into a lot more medium-sized organizations and smaller organizations. And of course, as the smaller organizations are outsourcing to the cloud, the cloud providers, especially if they're using ODM equipment instead of OEM equipment, which is, in my opinion, doesn't last as long, and they're refreshing more often, we're gonna see an increase in that. So everything looks, absolutely positive. I think the other thing is that the third-party maintenance marketplace, which I've been involved with for many, many years, has gone through a lot of acquisitions. And we've seen some of that, especially recently. And if you get on in a couple hours, we've got an excellent M&A session with a number of panelists that are going to really educate you on what's going on in that industry and how to prepare for the M&A market. And we'll be able to answer questions for you. But I really foresee, as we work on bigger contracts, there's companies that want a more global, service delivery from their clients. And so it's the same as it's been in the third-party maintenance industry, that those bigger providers are more apt to get the global contracts. And then obviously they don't have facilities in every country or every region. And so they're going to be using a channel of partners, which has gone on in the third-party maintenance marketplace. And then, then acquisitions happen. So I really see acquisitions picking up in that space, but we'll find out later. Now, one of the things that you might be saying, geez, Todd, this is supposed to be going up, but our business this year isn't necessarily going up. Well, there's a reason for that. So this is a recent IDC report that came out, and they're tracking the Q1 2023 sales of the top PC manufacturers. And as you can see, the demand is way down, almost 30% down of what the expectations were. So, that's really, there's too much inventory. I think that we all thought when the chips started shipping that this avalanche of refresh is going to happen. Well, refresh doesn't happen when you're laying off employees. And that's what the tech sector is doing, and a lot of the different sectors are doing, because you got high inflation all over the world, and it's just not a good economy right now. But and then if you look at that versus the same type of report in server sales, the IDC put out, they readjusted their estimates for 2023 to be a very nominal, hardly any growth in server shipments. So I think what you're going to see is we're all assuming that, there's other things like wars potentially with China and Taiwan. You've got the Russia-Ukraine situation going on, but you've also got a lot of environmental lobbying going on. Companies are trying to get in line. Everybody's aware that we've got to take care of Mother Earth. So assuming that, the economy starts picking back up, of which, I think it will, I think that we're going to start seeing that major refresh coming next year and the year after. So while this year may be a hold year, I think, that also gives a number of companies time. When we're too busy, we don't have time to work on our own companies. We don't have time to put in, ISO quality management systems, start working on ITAD certifications. And so when these times get a little bit slower, that's when you've got the capability of spending some time in those areas. So that's definitely what I would recommend. So just wanted to give you guys a little bit of highlight on some of the financial numbers that's going on, some of the growth numbers that are being projected. And, I think overall, I'd rather be in this industry, considering the refreshes that are going to be coming and the environmental and compliance requirements that are coming, than any other part of the IT industry right now. So, Rike, hand it over to you.
Thanks. Just one thing before, I was a little bit missed in not introducing you properly. Todd Bone is chairman of ASCDI, also CEO of XSI, recently sold his company, and is an ITAD, an R2 V3 certified ITAD. So, Todd, thank you very much. And our second speaker for this segment is Rike Sandlin from River Vista Partners. If anybody knows anything about the ITAD industry, it's Rike, one of the smartest guys, one of the most educated guys in the ITAD world today. And Rike, I really want to hear I'm interested in your take on a little bit of some of the changes that we've seen going on.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Joe. It's getting a little deep in here, but Joe, you started off with some comments about the ecosystem, right? The resellers, the ITAD service providers. That ecosystem also includes transportation companies. It also includes more of the e-scrap end of life recycling side of ITAD, and they all interact. It's the same ecosystem, and they're all driven by a lot of the same economic dynamics that Todd mentioned. But some take more of a focus on service, some take more of a focus on resale, some take more of a focus on more of the end of life material recovery. None of those are a bad thing. All of those are good business strategies, and it really just depends on what these companies want to do. One of the exciting things that we've seen in the past couple of years is ASCDI certification program to help those companies stand out that are ethical, that are actually providing the services to the corporate accounts that need those ITAD services. And so I think that's a great kind of semi-new thing. It's something that came out a couple of years ago, and I'm excited to see that. We talked a bit about change. Todd talked about changes that are going on. Coming out of COVID, labor. We all got impacted by labor shortages. The supply chain, everything from grocery stores to IT was impacted by shortages. We're starting to see a lot of that work its way out. Chips are not quite as constrained as they were. Transportation is still a problem. Transportation of equipment or materials around the country or around the world is still really backed up and still a problem. I think anybody that resells in this industry has seen price changes in the past year. Prices went up during COVID, which was nice, and then prices on some equipment have plummeted in the past few months. It's not fun. That kind of change is not fun. Some of that is just due to supply and demand. Some of that is due more to the macroeconomic uncertainty that Todd mentioned. This question of, are we moving, is the R word, recession, going to happen? Are we moving that direction? Are interest rates going to level out? What are those macroeconomic dynamics that are going to impact the microeconomics of the industry or of particular companies? And so lots of change, lots of uncertainty. So that uncertainty means there's more change coming. And so there's, that's one of the things I love about an association like ASCDI, that you get to talk to your peers, you get to network and problem solve together. What are you seeing? What are you seeing? And being able to not feel quite so isolated as these changes occur. Lean on each other for wisdom. That's a great thing.
And Rike, thanks for saying that, because that's really what today's all about. Folks, we didn't ask our presenters today to script a lot of PowerPoints. So the last thing we wanted to do was kill you by PowerPoint today. We wanted to have discussions like this, because lots of times throughout the year, I'll get on the phone with Todd or Rike, and we'll talk about what's going on in the industry. And those happen to be the most educational moments of the day for me. So use today as a time to communicate. You can ask Q&As, you can meet with any of the attendees, chat with them, do one-on-one videos with them, whichever you like. Todd, you said something pretty interesting about, when we slow down, it's a time to retool. I mean, yeah. I'm paraphrasing what you said. And I think that's brilliant. I hadn't really thought of that, but I mean, with all now is a good time if you're looking at it becoming a certified ITAD with, one of the certification companies. Now is a good time to do that, I would think.
Yeah, and we, along with Rike's firm, we've got a number of other consulting firms available through ASCDI that can help you get there. And it's not, it depends on where you are in your quality management system. But anything that gets measured gets improved. So you should at least have a quality management system, and that's typically we were ISO 9001 certified, which got us quite a bit of the way there to the requirements for R2. But, I think it is a good time. It is a bit time consuming. You have to put some additional controls in place. You've got to put some documents in place where you're tracking information, because ultimately you have to prove that what you say in your certification, you actually do. And that's what the auditors are going to be looking for. So I think with all the resources that are out there today, it can be a non-painless scenario to start working on these certifications. And Rike, I'm glad you brought up ASCDI ITAD Certify, because if you look at NAID, ADISA, and R2V3, I know that there's well over 1,600 locations that have those certifications around the world. And just because they have the certification doesn't mean they're a company that pays their bills on time, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why you've got ASCDI and our ethics process, is that, you can, we control that. Everybody signs, the ethics, guide and, certification that they're going to be a good company in our industry. We vet them as members. And so that's just an additional step to ensure that you don't have these types of issues. Because the last thing you want as a company that, like, as I mentioned before, you're going to get ITAD projects that, the company says, okay, now can you do something over in APAC? Well, if you're reaching out to an ASCDI member that does business in APAC, that's going to be you're going to have a lot better time, getting somebody that's good than looking up on one of these certification sites and seeing who's in APAC that can help you. So, it just that makes things more efficient, and it really protects your risk against losses. It's not just that. I mean, we're talking about data bearing devices, and if you hire the wrong person downstream and then they disappear, you're the one that's footing the bill to the client. So take that stuff seriously.
Todd, you guys were primarily a service company that became an ITAD. What about the concept of not being a one-trick pony? What I mean by that is, you're talking about there's a slowdown right now, in refreshes, but that also must mean that if you're in the service industry, stuff is staying put.
Third-party maintenance contracts are up. Companies are holding on to their equipment longer. The shipment delays prove that. Matter of fact, I think that COVID, if anything, really enhanced the IT aftermarket for refurbished enterprise gear, because we had clients calling us saying, hey, we've got a 6-month to 12-month backlog from Cisco, and we can't wait. I mean, what do you have model wise that you can provide to us? And so I think it really gave a lot more credibility to the to all of our members that sell refurbished equipment. But the other thing that we're seeing is that larger companies are starting to the old adage that you want to reduce the number of vendors that you work with and work with more good vendors. Well, we're signing multi-year contracts that include third-party maintenance, professional services, and ITAD. So, I mean, that's the situation you want to be. And now you might say, hey, we don't do third-party maintenance. We don't do professional services. Neither do we. When we started selling third-party maintenance services, I went to SMS, and XSI was SMS's first channel partner. And so, you can build, what we did was, and the reason we ended up doing third-party maintenance is that the key to third-party maintenance is that, the first year you're going to have a lot of expense buying the spares that you need and putting them in place. And then the second year is replenishment. Well, we weren't sharing in that profit with our channel provider, right? So but there's lots of companies out there that provide, third-party maintenance and professional services and private label that service and can get you up and running. And what I would do is at some point, if you find yourself doing enough volume in those areas, then you can insource like we did and start your own program where you're not outsourcing anymore and you actually, are making more profit every year.
I'll tell you, there's also, Rike, I have a question for you, but one thing I want to throw at you, Todd, also is leasing. One of the expertise that most of our members have is the acquisition. We know where to buy stuff at the right price. If you can acquire this equipment at the right price, you can put it out on a lease and compete with any brand holder. And when you can also own it at the end of life.
You can also rent equipment where they're not getting new equipment from the manufacturer. Hey, I'll rent it to you for 6 to 12 months. The other trend that we're starting to see is the OpEx expense versus CapEx expense. We're actually working on a number of infrastructure as a service transactions where they want us to buy their entire infrastructure, lease it back to them for, depending on the age of the equipment, 3 to 5 years, and then provide a maintenance contract and ITAD services on top of it. So at that point, you own that contract because you're the leaseor, and you can build that into your contract. So I think you're going to see a dynamic shift coming here pretty quickly over the next few years, that these larger companies don't want to tie their money up in assets, and they'd rather be paying the annual OpEx expense and lease expense.
Right. Or put it another way, the enterprises can expense the service rather than capitalize it.
That's right.
Yeah. Right. Do you see Rike's company does, folks, is, he consults companies that are ITADs or looking to become ITADs. Are you seeing more requests on a percentage basis here in the States or Europe or APAC? What do you see coming to your desk?
Most of my practice, Joe, is in North America, but I am seeing some interest from other areas. This will kind of go into our M&A discussion later on, talking about the globalization of ITAD and how that's impacting the opportunity to consolidate the industry. One thing I'm seeing a lot in consulting right now is ESG. And
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, organizations are starting to see that ESG is going to become a requirement. Large companies may have a regulatory requirement. The smaller companies are part of their supply chain, are going to be questioned, are going to be asked about their own ESG programs. So
explain. I'm going to interrupt you. Explain ESG from the enterprise standpoint. start from the ground and work your way up.
Yeah, sure. ESG, environment, social, and governance. It's a set of policies and performance related to climate change, circularity of materials and equipment, social policies, how you support your employees, how you interact with the community, and how what your governance is. And so, when we think about governance, data security is part of governance. Process controls and certifications are part of governance. So your ethics program is part of governance. These are really important. And so we're seeing that companies in the ITAD sector are recognizing, one, they have a great advantage, great opportunity to showcase what they're doing, but on the other, they know that requirements are coming from their enterprise clients. And so, we actually have an ESG session tomorrow that we'll be talking about digging into this more deeply. There's a sustainability session later today. But when we think about ESG is a journey. Sustainability is a journey, and it's about storytelling with credibility. And when we think about telling your story around environment, social, and governance, you got to be credible. And that kind of ties in with certifications, that ties in with ethics. And so, all of these kind of things work together. But that's where I'm seeing a lot of consulting interest right now.
Yeah. And if we're answering RFPs, we're getting the request on what are we doing in these areas. So, it's coming. My biggest fear, and Joe, I've told you this before, is that that a lot of the companies that are members of ASCDI that, are used to buying equipment from end user organizations are going to have some type of certification down the road to be able to buy the equipment, just because of the compliance that these companies are going to have. And so I don't want to see that happen to our members, that one day, hey, we used to buy, liquid, we used to call it liquidation, right? We used to liquidate from these large, Fortune 500 companies, and now you can't do it anymore because you don't have these certifications in place. So,
last week we were at the ITAM conference. That's the IT Asset Managers Conference. All three of us were there, as a matter of fact. And it's a very common story there. But for this audience, maybe not so much. The Morgan Stanley story, Rike, I'm referring to. That's a perfect poster child for why enterprises are going to demand to do business with certified ITADs. We have about 3 minutes left of the session, but in 3 minutes or less, can you net out Morgan Stanley? What happened?
Well, yeah, Morgan Stanley, effectively, Morgan Stanley lost control. They had a couple of data center decommissions that occurred, and the controls that they put in place, they didn't follow properly. And they didn't have the proper governance of their own processes. They lost control of equipment, could not account for the data sanitization of that equipment and proper disposition. So, and as a result, they got fined, sued. It's a mess. About 150 million or more in just the fines and lawsuit settlements, plus just the massive damage to their brand. That's the biggest cost that enterprises see is potential damage to their brand when they don't follow process. So
will Morgan Stanley ever do business again with a company that's not a certified ITAD?
I can't imagine any enterprise doing business without a certified ITAD, but they do, and that's a little scary.
Yeah. Final words, and folks, audience. The next set, we kind of didn't allow any time between sessions, so we're going to end in all of our sessions, this one included, 1 or 2 minutes before it's supposed to end, to get the other people back on stage. But any final closing comments, Todd? Right?
Yeah, I mean, our business, I would say, at least tripled due to getting our ITAD certification. Oh, wow. So it was well worth the investment. Took a lot of time, but now it's rolling, and I definitely would encourage everybody, all the ACDI members, to get a certification. Worst case scenario, start off with a ISO 9001 quality management system, because it's not a big stepping stone from there to a cert.
Yeah, and actually the next session's on certification. So, Steve
Mellon, right? That's great.
from Adissa and Roger Grivey from SERI are both going to be talking about some of those core certifications that we all need, and that the ASCDI certification leverages and sits on top of from an ethics perspective.
Guys, thank you. That's a great lead-in, right? So, folks, we're going to sign off right now. Stay tuned. In about 60 seconds, we're going to come back on with our next session. Thank you all. Thank you guys very much. And thank you all for being here today.
Take care.